Hi, my name is Erica Asimwe.
And I'm Richard Taylor.
And welcome to the Crossing the Raging River podcast. In our last episode, we actually introduced you to the concept of crossing the raging river, and we told you that leadership is like a journey that leaders have to go through, and they encounter different challenges, and this podcast is about how the leaders can overcome those challenges as they are trying to cross from one place to another and take leaders with them. So what's this episode about, Richard?
Well, I'm very excited about this episode, Erica.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about how what's upstream in leadership flows downstream. And so often as leaders, we're only focused on what we can see right in front of us, that we don't recognize that what we see in front of us, the results that we have, are highly influenced by the beliefs, the mindsets, and the values that we carry as leaders.
I'm looking forward to having this discussion as well, because I think I've been in so many scenarios where I've seen how mindsets have affected us as people who are being led by, and I know of a story. This is something I experienced myself because I was part of this institution, and in that institution we boasted about servant leadership. At the core of our mission was servant leadership.
That sounds good so far. Servant leadership.
Yeah, I actually don't know what we meant by servant leadership then, but we were taught about it, and everyone in the organization had to be a servant leader. And I remember the leaders of that organization were leaders who were quite educated, and they felt that they needed to be addressed by their titles. I mean, if you don't address them by their titles, they would literally write a long email. This happened to me, telling you why you should address them by their titles. Imagine addressing them by titles like doctor, professor, doctor, even beyond what I had ever heard. I thought a doctor is, if you're a professor, then it's higher than a doctor.
Yes.
But we had to mention everything, the master's degree, the doctor, everything they had ever gone through. But also beyond that, the culture in the organization was people feared those leaders. They made all the decisions themselves. And later on, when the leaders left the organization, there was a lot of funds embezzlement. They brought the organization down. It was almost running bankrupt by the time they left that organization. We later found out that they were using those resources for themselves. They would take those resources, the organizational resources, to live in fancy houses, to buy fancy clothes, and the staff suffered, of course. Salaries were not increasing, but their lives were transforming while they were there.
Wow. It sounds like even though they were teaching you about servant leadership, that they weren't actually living that out in their lives. There was some different kind of beliefs or values or mindset that was driving that. What do you think were some of those things that led to that terrible result?
I think there are so many mindsets that I saw. I felt like one of them was about how they felt that as leaders, they needed to be on top. They need to be seen. That's exactly the opposite of servant leadership. It needed to be about them. They need to be respected. Even just being called by your title means you are better than everyone else.
It's not bad to have a title, but it was the fact that was what it was all about.
And it was insisted that you have to call them Professor Doctor. If you don't call them Professor Doctor, then you would be reprimanded, and that would be addressed. And that all the other staff had no say, that leaders had the final word in the decisions.
So power and control and authority were held in the hands of the leaders.
Yes.
Interesting. So yeah, that's exactly what we're really talking about today, Erica. We're really just talking about the idea that we need to focus first on what we actually believe, what our mindset is, what our beliefs are as leaders have a huge influence on what happens in our leadership. I would maybe ask our listeners to imagine a scenario where we've been talking a lot about rivers in this podcast, so let's use a river again. You're walking along a river with your friends, and so imagine a river that's in your own place or your own community. You're walking along that river, and then one day, as you're walking with your friends, you're enjoying the environment, you notice that there's a lot of garbage in the river, flowing in the river, that it's contaminating the river, and you're very concerned about it. So you spend the whole day, you and your friends, stopping what you're doing, jumping in, grabbing things, using nets to try and pull the garbage out of the river.
Yeah.
And after one exhausting day, you take a deep breath, you give high fives, you're so proud of yourselves because we cleaned up the river, and you go on your way.
Yeah.
Now, the next day comes. Your friends and you're going on another walk at your lunch break, and then you notice that in the same river, there's the same amount of garbage. Another day, you suspend what you're doing. You spend the whole day trying to clean up the garbage in the river. And then, now you're even more tired, but you give each other high fives. We finally cleaned it up. You go on your way. Now imagine, Erica, a third day. You go along. You see there's even more garbage in the river. What would that lead you to conclude?
I would be asking myself where this garbage is coming from.
Okay.
I need to go to that place.
You need to go to that place. So you need to go where?
I need to go find the person who's throwing that garbage and give them a piece of my mind.
Give them a piece of your mind. You need to go upstream.
Yeah.
Because where you are is downstream.
Yeah.
But there's some source. There's either a company that's dumping garbage in the river. There's people who are dumping garbage in the river.
Yeah.
I remember seeing one picture of a holy river in India called the Ganges. And there were people bathing in a river full of garbage, full of dogs, full of other things. And yet this is a holy river because somebody wasn't taking care of all the garbage that was being dumped from the source. What do you think we can kind of gather from this analogy?
I think what I'm hearing you say is that this is coming from somewhere. There's a source. And trying to solve the challenge from the end of the river is not actually the best way, because you keep doing the same thing over and over again unless you are able to solve the root cause of this challenge.
Yes, that's exactly right. The root cause. But yet so often as leaders, we only deal with results, and we deal with what we see right in front of us. We deal with emergencies. We deal with issues. We deal with all of the things that are coming on our desks. We don't stop. It's like jumping in the river as soon as you see the garbage.
Yeah.
But it just keeps coming because we're not dealing with the source.
I think the thoughts that comes to my mind about why we usually do that as leaders is it's a lot of work to find the source.
It is a lot of work.
It is, it takes much more time than just firefighting and solving the challenge that comes right there.
I remember a time early on in my own leadership. I had just helped to start a nonprofit organization that was involved in education, and we didn't have a lot of resources.
Yeah.
And so I tried to do everything myself. I thought I was maybe like I could be some kind of superhero.
Yeah.
But I just brought myself to the point of exhaustion, trying to deal with emergencies and solve every single issue, instead of finding ways to actually deal with the core issues and bring other people along to help. So there's a model that we've kind of developed in the Abundant Leadership Institute, with both you and I are part of, which kind of helps to describe this. And the idea is that our beliefs as leaders, our beliefs, our values, and our mindset, those things that really are at the core of who we are, even our culture, those core things, they actually strongly influence the leadership model that we follow. And then the leadership model that we follow, it has a huge impact on the methods that we use as a leader. So for example, when you were talking about the university situation where those professors were they cared more about titles than the actual learning of their students.
Yeah.
The methods that they had were impacted by the beliefs that they had, that they were superior to the students. And it was more important for them to be revered than for learning to actually happen. Now you get to the place of results. And what was the result in that university institution? It wasn't good, was it?
No, it wasn't. So much happened. There was lots of mistrust, resources lost, so many things that were happening as a result of their model. I
think our listeners can probably really relate to this. If you're listening to this podcast, I'd like you to think about a time where or a situation you're facing right now where you're seeing very significant results, and ask that question: what are the beliefs the values and the mindsets that are really driving this forward.
Yeah.
You know, there's a research study by a professor named Dr. Carol Dweck. She's from Stanford University. And Dr. Dweck really does a great job looking upstream. One of her most famous studies is when she looks at the difference between people who have a growth mindset and people who have what she calls a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
Now, Erica, what do you think that she means by growth mindset?
I think it's people who are willing to learn from others, who don't see themselves as at the center of everything. They are learning from others as they lead. I think that's how I would summarize it.
Yeah, they have an open mind. They're open to new experience. They're open to get feedback. They're open to learning from their mistakes. Even when they make a mistake, they see it as an opportunity to learn. They see it as an opportunity to get better. What do you think Dr. Dweck means by somebody with a fixed mindset?
I guess it's the opposite. Someone who feels like they know it all. I think we know those people. I've been doing this for a long time. I have all this experience. I don't need anyone else to tell me. I went to school for this.
Yeah, it's interesting. It actually happens a lot to educated people.
Yeah.
People who have a lot of knowledge and they think they're an expert in some area.
Exactly.
So then they aren't open to new ways of thinking and new experiences. And what do you think can be the consequence of a fixed mindset?
Well, there's a lot. Your organization, if you are a leader with a fixed mindset, you will not grow. You will not adapt to new changes. You will think you have it all, and the world will leave you behind. In this tech world, if you are a tech organization with a fixed mindset, you will be relevant in months because things are always changing. You will not adapt to the changes that are happening around you. Yeah,
that's absolutely true. The world will leave you behind. You know what Dr. Dweck's research found was actually quite dramatic.
Yeah,
she worked with a group of people with similar skill sets, similar academic background, similar training. The only real difference between these groups of people was whether they exhibited what she called a growth mindset or whether they exhibited a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
She tracked them over a longer period of time. And she saw that the difference in success between those with a growth mindset and those with a fixed mindset was dramatic.
Yes.
It was unmistakable that the mindset that people had made a huge difference on the results that they actually achieved.
Yeah. And I think we all sometimes struggle with this, Richard, don't we? There are times when we have a growth mindset about a situation and times when we have a fixed mindset. I think it's something that we need to keep reminding ourselves and bringing ourselves to a point of saying, how am I having a fixed mindset about this situation and how can I adopt a more open mindset? Do you have any stories to share with us about your personal?
Yeah, it's a real human struggle. I think that for me, that's a good point that you make, that we're not always just growth or just fixed mindset. There are certain areas of our lives where we can be fixed. I would say probably especially recently, some of the new technology that's been coming.
Yes.
Like AI.
Yeah.
Right? I'll be truthful with you. It kind of scares me.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about that. And we've been talking about what role artificial intelligence can even play here in Africa to try and bring development forward. But it scares us as people because it's hard to control and we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to do is to challenge myself to have a growth mindset. That doesn't mean swallowing everything about the technology, just saying, oh, because the technology is there, it must be good. Yeah. We have to think about it from a biblical perspective. We have to think about how God created us as human beings, rooting our identity in Him, but also being open to say, how could these tools actually help to make people's lives better? Yeah. And that's an area where I think I've been struggling, but now even with your help, I've been starting to think, okay, maybe there's some ways, if we at least are grounded in our beliefs, that we can use AI as a tool to make an impact.
I'm a fan of AI. Everybody knows that. I think it came to make life easier, but I think we need to approach it cautiously. I think having a growth mindset as a Christian also means putting our values at the heart of it and weighing everything around that and making sure we're adopting this growth mindset while putting our values ahead of us. And for me personally, I think one of the challenges I've had around fixed mindset is when I'm very passionate about something, I'm not usually always open to feedback. I mean, recently I was teaching. When I'm teaching about the asset-based community development, which we will be talking about in later episodes, I get very passionate that I raise my voice so high. I actually never know that I'm shouting. And so I had my sister in class. And you know, sisters don't come, they have nothing to hide. They're there to shoot you.
Sisters have nothing to hide.
And she's like, but why do you have to raise your voice? And I said, I'm not raising my voice. I'm just passionate. But I've found that when I'm passionate about something, getting feedback is very difficult about that particular thing. And I don't even notice that I'm doing something in a particular way and I'm not open to feedback in that. Yeah.
It's so critical that you mentioned feedback, because I think that's a big distinguisher between somebody with a fixed and growth mindset. If we're open to feedback, and sometimes those beliefs that we have, those values that we hold, we actually need a mirror. You know, from other people who we care about to show us, you know, this is actually what I see that you really believe, or you know, because we can have blind spots about it as well. And the other thing that for you and I as Christians, we really believe is that mirror comes from our faith in Jesus Christ, that because we have the Holy Spirit, because we have Jesus' example, that even when we have bad beliefs, even when we have mindsets that can be destructive, our mind can be renewed. That's the hope that we have, is that we're not stuck in bad beliefs. We're not stuck in bad mindsets. We can actually transform. We can move from scarcity to abundance. I think it's Romans 12:2, right? Where it talks about the renewing of our minds.
Renewing of our minds, so that we are not conformed to the patterns of this world. It's a process every day, renewing our minds by the word of God, so that we can keep our minds open. I think there is nothing, even if we are talking about all these great solutions, all solutions are in the word of God. And the Bible encourages us to renew our minds daily so that we can be able to have a growth mindset. I think that's what we are talking about. And I like it when David actually prays a prayer to God, say, search my heart. I think as leaders, sometimes we can be so filled with the work that we are doing every day and not stop to reflect and say, God, search my heart and know my anxious ways. In Psalm 139, he prays that prayer. So I think it's a reminder for all of us to always step back and reflect, so that God can always lead us towards a growth mindset, and he can show us areas of our lives where we need to adopt more of the growth mindset.
And ultimately, to have those beliefs and those values, the more they align with who he is, his heart, his character, the better impact and the results that we'll see in the lives of people that we serve. That's a wonderful reflection, Erica. So friends who are listening to this podcast, our encouragement to you today is just go upstream.
Yes.
Don't just focus on the emergencies, the results that are right in front of you. And when you go upstream, first look at your own beliefs and values and mindsets, and then those of your community, because the only way that we're really going to solve things for the long term is if we get to the core, we get to the root, we get to the source. What's upstream flows downstream. And so as leaders, we have to be focused upstream in order to influence the people that we're trying to serve.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's difficult to know when we have those mindsets, and sometimes we can sit back and reflect on our own lives as leaders. What has been happening in my journey as a leader? Why is it that whenever I'm in this situation, I respond this way? Just asking ourselves reflective questions that can help us to see where there's a particular belief that is stopping us from progressing or from leading others well. So this is what we were talking about today. What are we going to talk about in our next episode?
Well, we're going to build from this, right? We're going to actually build from the research of Dr. Dweck, but we're going to look at what happens then when you're working in situations where there seems to be a lack of material resources, there seems to be dependency, there seems to be a scarcity of things for leaders to actually make a difference. You know, how can we move from a scarcity mindset, and what impact does that scarcity mindset have to a more abundant mindset?
I'm looking forward to having that conversation, and we hope that you enjoyed this session today with us. As usual, we invite you to go to our website at kurumbuka.org/podcast if you want to hear more podcasts and get access to more resources that we have there for you as leaders. Thank you for joining us.
Remember, go upstream.